Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Granbury will now come to order at 6 p.m. on Monday, July the 10th, 2023, Granbury City Hall, City Council Chambers. The first item on the agenda today is public comments on agenda items that are non-public hearing agenda items. However, everything we have tonight are public hearing items, so we'll go on to C, the consent agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the June 12th, 2023 regular P&Z meeting. Do I have any corrections or additions, deletions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented by staff.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We got a motion by Mr. Moore to approve the minutes and a second by Mr. Erdman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First item on the agenda is D3. Consider the request of Juanita Couch for a Pacific use permit to allow a short-term rental STR residential unhosted in a residential 7,000 R7 zoning district. The property is addressed as 510 West Dual Street. Kira?
Thank you. On this first slide is your location map shown with an aerial. The site is outlined in teal. The neighborhood context consists of single-family residential properties and short-term rentals nearby. This is a request for a SUP, a specific use permit for short-term residential unhosted, and this property would have 2 bedrooms. There's no history of a short-term rental on this site, and it's zoned R7 for residential uses and historic preservation overlay. There are no improvements at this time that would require Historic Preservation Commission review. This is a context map showing the short-term rentals within 600 feet. They are shown there. They're a little bit hard to see on our displays this evening. Nonetheless, they're on the map shown in pink and black outlines. This is the site plan submitted by the applicant. It shows the single-family house with a driveway off of Doyle Street. That driveway will accommodate 2 parking spaces. 2 spaces are required for the short-term rental with 2 bedrooms, 1 parking space per each bedroom. This is the floor plan. It shows 2 bedrooms in the house with other rooms dedicated to other purposes. The SUP criteria for making your decisions include zoning ordinance 11.1A and zoning ordinance section 11.1B. 11.1A has 4 criteria. Of these, 3 of the 4 criteria are completely satisfied. Criteria number 4 can be satisfied with a condition to provide screening of the headlight sweep. And then on 11.1B, 9 of the 10 criteria appear to be satisfied, and these are performance, safety, and public welfare, and these will be accountable. Criteria 9 speaks to parking, and again, there's a condition recommended for the screening of the headlight sweep. We did serve public notice through the mail as well as the newspaper with mailings to 19 individual property owners. We have received no responses for this application. The staff is recommending approval with 7 conditions, a 1-year term since this is a new use with no history on the property, site plan and floor plan, condition to perform to those exhibits, and to provide screening of the headlight sweep along the driveway. The short-term rental would be limited to not more than 2 bedrooms as requested, and the remaining 3 conditions speak to public safety, health, and welfare, tying the request into the city zoning ordinance and city code requirements. These are your voting options, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here? And if so, would you like to speak? Do any questions for the applicant's representative or the applicant? If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion for the SUP request.
Chair, I move to approve as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Hayes to approve the SUP as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Skip. Sorry, Skip. Tell me your last name again. I'm so sorry. I was in the process of writing it down. And that, it's second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, the second item tonight is D2, public hearing, consider request of Texas Tires for a specific use permit to allow the operation of an auto repair minor business in a light commercial zoning district and to allow daily outdoor display of wheels and tires. The property is addressed as 2106 East Highway 377. Kira?
Thank you. This is your location map with the site outlined in teal or green on my map. The site neighborhood is commercial in nature. There's a abutting to the east automobile use, and to the south is retail. To the west is a railroad track, and to the east is general retail sales. The site is zoned for light commercial. In context, the heavy commercial is to the north and to the south of the property. The railroad track to the north is also zoned, but not developed over that way. The history of this site, there have been 3 specific use permits on the site for auto repair and daily outdoor storage. The auto repair, at the last SUP, there was a lack of information on how that SUP was to perform in terms of minor auto repair, and so this request has included that, as well as the daily outdoor display, which was limited to three years. So this is the site plan. It shows a building on the south side of the property with parking on the north side, and the orange dot or red dot on this drawing, the site plan drawing, shows the location the applicant proposes to display their tires. That would be their daily outdoor display activity. They're currently been doing this with 3 tire racks that they pull in and out of the building on a daily basis. And this is just a little bit of a zoom in so you can see that little area a little better. The specific use permit criteria are all satisfied for zoning ordinance 11-1A, and for zoning ordinance 11-1B, all criteria are also satisfied. I would reference you to the staff report, which I've shored up this staff report, or staff presentation tonight. Our staff report contains all of the SUP criteria in a narrative form. I just wanted to ease our efforts tonight. We have a pretty large agenda. We've also provided public notice by mailing out 15 public notices to all owners of real property, and also in the Cook County News. We've received no input from anyone from those mailings. Staff is recommending approval with the following condition, and I've separated these between the auto repair minor use and the daily outdoor display use to create a little more formal record for people who come along and want to review the SUP in the future. So the first condition for the minor outdoor repair is that the SUP does not have a term limit. The history of the SUP for auto repair, there was not any term limit. The auto repair minor use and operations shall conform to the site plan. And number 3, all other activities shall conform to the zoning ordinance and the city code requirements. And now secondly, for the daily outdoor display, the SUP shall expire 5 years from the initial expiration date, so that's a city council date of 8/1/28. And the area of the daily outdoor display shall be limited to not more than 10% of the gross building area, and except as provided in these conditions, subject to all zoning ordinance and applicable city code requirements. These are your voting options, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here, and if so, would you like to speak? Any questions for the applicant, commission members? Okay, question for Kira?
Kira, this is on the display, this is a renewal, correct? Because I think I remember in the past us approving this.
That's correct.
I know previously when we approved it, the drawing was a little more specific in terms of dimensions of the outdoor display, whereas this site plan is just kind of a generic circle. Previously when we did it, I know they actually had measurements on how far it could go this way, how far it could go that way. What is the overall gross of the building itself? Do you know that?
Let me see if I have that.
And they adhered to it. I mean, I drive by all the time, and they did always adhere to that drawing and previously.
That circle area, squared up, is no more than 10% of the floor area of the building. I don't see the square footage of the building right offhand. I did run that calculation to confirm the size.
Does it all have to be in that one area, the 10% square footage, or is that spread out? Does it have to be confined within that one little
Right.
circle?
It needs to be confined to the area that they're showing us, otherwise it's difficult to track over time.
Yeah.
And the outdoor storage can migrate if it's not controlled like that.
Right. Okay. I just know previously we had a very specific area with dimensions on it, whereas this was kind of a just generic circle. So that was my only question.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant? If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the requested SUP request, please.
Motion to approve as presented.
Is it two options?
Are we voting on two?
It's your choice how you would want to structure that. There's one application in front of you with conditions for each use requested.
So do you want
You
a
could-
separate for the auto repair and a separate for the, is that what you want?
You could have one
one
motion
motion?
and
Okay.
cover both. yes.
Okay, so motion on the request, what's up on the board for the SUP with the recommendation for staff that's displayed in front of us on the screen. That was your thing, as one motion, okay? So would someone like to make that? You did, oh, okay, sorry. Mr. Irvin make the motion to approve as presented by staff,
And I'll second.
Mm-hmm.
and a second by Mr. Moore. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is D3, and the record will show that Mr. Hayes has reclused himself from this one. So the public hearing is consists of request of Additech Incorporated for a specific use permit to add a self-contained DEF dispensing unit to an existing fuel station in a light commercial zoning district. The property's address is 3905 East Highway 377. Kira?
Yeah. This is your location map showing the site outlined in teal. It's an existing gas station located along Highway 377, and the neighborhood context is retail, as well as some unimproved properties that are nearby. The zoning for the site is light commercial. The surrounding property is zoned light commercial as well. In 2018, a specific use permit was issued for a fuel station, and there exists 18 fuel positions or pump locations, and a cashier services building. So this request is to add one new fuel position specifically for diesel and exhaust fluid. It's a product additive for diesel vehicles. And the DEF, the diesel exhaust fluid, would be located as shown on this slide. There's a small blue dot. I'm going to have to explain where this is. It's hard to see. So there's, towards the upper right of the site, there are two vehicles in the drive lane. Can you see those little things that look like bugs? Those are vehicles. On the right side of those vehicles, there's a little tiny blue dot, and that is representative of the location for the DEF facility. There is adequate space. I went out to the site, I did some measurements, staff looked at it as well. There is adequate space for maneuvering around that new fueling position. And our fire staff has also looked at the site plan and did not have any concerns. And this is what the DEF facility looks like. It can have the fuel position on either the long side of the building or the long side of that structure, or at the end of the structure. Little cut out so you can see what's going on inside. Basically, it's a reservoir inside, and then it pumps and dispenses out. Again, we review this zoning ordinance 11-1A and find all four criteria are satisfied, as well as 11-1B. All criteria can be satisfied and will accommodate public health, safety, and welfare. I would incorporate the staff report to the record. And our public notice, we did mail out 10 public notices and advertise in the Hood County News. We've not received anything in responses either in favor nor in opposition of this request. Staff is recommending approval with the following conditions. All operation and site improvements in conformance with the site plan, and except as provided in these conditions, all operations and site improvements are subject to the zoning ordinance and city code requirements. And as usual, I would be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here? And if so, would you like to speak? Or would you like, no? Any questions, commission members, from the applicant or staff?
Madam
You do?
Chair, I have a question.
For the
Is
staff
there?
or applicant?
Oh, excuse me?
For staff? Okay.
Yeah.
Proceed.
Is there going to be a retaining wall around this for spillage in case it's hit?
There's not been any such requirement for spillage. They would, however, have to, comply with any environmental requirements that might be required during the construction phase.
Okay.
Kira, you said you had gone out and taken a look at the site. It shows 43 foot there, but that's with cars going both directions. Do you feel like this is the best location? I can see a traffic jam happening real quick.
Yeah, I think for the constraints of this site, oops, let me go back to that little site plan there. There we go. I think for the purpose of this site, this is the best location. Again, when you drive out there and you actually park and get out of your vehicle and experiment with it, it is adequate space for vehicle movement. There might be some blockage of parking. However, this is not a traditional gas station with full convenience store operations. So while some parking in those spaces might be blocked, it would be very minimal impact.
Any other questions for staff or for the applicant? If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the specific use permit request.
I'll make a motion for approval with the two conditions.
I have a motion to approve with the two conditions by Mr. Hallman. Do I have a second? I'm sorry, was that Mr. Overdeer? A second by Mr. Overdeer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Carol, would you call it? Whoever's on the end, Earl, there's Richard, okay. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is D4, public hearing. Consider the following request of Lake Granbury Medical Center to final plat a 13.058 acre tract of the Jeremiah Campbell Survey, abstract number 122 as Lot 1, Block 1 of the Martin Coleman Edition. The property is located southeast of the intersection of US Highway 377 and Fall Creek Highway. Kira?
Okay, this is your location map. The site is outlined in green or teal on the map. It's an undeveloped property, and many of the properties surrounding are also undeveloped. The site is about 13 acres in size and is the first parcel out of the preliminary plat to be final platted. The zoning is light commercial, as is the property to the east and south. Other properties nearby are interim holding zoned. This is the final plat showing that one lot with easements for access and other improvement needs. This is the second page of the final plat, dedication, site boundary descriptions, those kinds of things. And staff is recommending approval of this final plat. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here? And if so, would you like to speak? Applicant's representative? Commission members, anybody have a question for the applicant's representative? No? For staff? No? Then I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the final plat request, please.
I'll make a motion for approval of the final plat.
I have a motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hallman and a second by Mr. Erdman to approve the final plat as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is D5, Consider request of Kathy Casey and Jim Leach to amend the existing plan development R10 zoning adopted ordinance number 19-57 to redefine and clarify the operation of the existing bed and breakfast hosted use on the site. The property is addressed as 205 and 221 West Doyle Street. Kira?
Thank you. And the site is located on West Doyle and outlined on this map in teal. The property consists of 3 primary buildings and what we would consider accessory buildings. To the east of the property is another short-term rental and residential uses, and to the west are short-term rentals and residential uses, as well as to the north. And to the south is Lake Granbury. Before I get too deep into the project, I want to emphasize that this is a renewal of an existing planned unit development. The purpose for this renewal is to reflect a number of things about the property and about the zoning ordinance. The site's been used for about 20 years for a bed and breakfast and a short-term rental. There's been 3 iterations of the PD over the course of the years. And we've worked very diligently with the property owner to capture the intent of their existing and proposed uses, as well as with a PD, planned district zoning, comes a development plan and the establishment of all the setbacks and other development standards and uses on the property. So this PD establishes all the uses that are proposed, are existing and have been on this site for quite some time, as well as the development standards that also have been on this site for quite some time. Those hadn't been spelled out in previous PDs, and that's really the intent here, is to set this property for a great future and success with the city. As with all our projects, we want everybody to be successful. So here's a more in-depth review of the site's uses. And there are 15 bedrooms. The prior PDs required 7. However, when the short-term rental is in use, the uses on this site can be either bed and breakfast with the host living on the site or short-term rental. Okay. The prior SUPs there's 2 properties involved. That's why it gets complicated. But there's 2 properties involved and 7 bedrooms in the current PD for each property. Well, that didn't recognize the bedroom for the host when they live off-site. So rather than a total of 7, one of the properties should have 8. So the proposal is to recognize the total of 15 bedrooms. And each site has its own representative characteristics within the PD. So if needed, each one can stand on its own. Okay. Again, going back to what I was stating, there's 3 main buildings: a main house, a pool house, and I believe they call it a lake house. So to the upper right corner, that main house consists of short-term rental bed and breakfast bedrooms and bathrooms, and I believe there's a sitting room and maybe some other rooms in there. And then the pool house has one of the bedrooms and a sitting room and other rooms. And then the lake house, which is there to the left side, was a house, and it's got 7 bedrooms in that one. I'm pretty sure. I'm looking at the applicant for help here. We went out and looked, and so we have a pretty good idea of how the site also looks from the ground rather than just from plans. There's a little accessory building north of that lake house, and we recognize that in this PD. Then the lake house, and then there's that building off to the right of the site that contains conference rooms, dining room, kitchen, and what I would characterize as support service rooms for the operation of the property. Okay, then we have the parking at the street on the site is off of Doyle. There's an access drive there. There's also parking close to the lake house at the lower left of the site. Regarding the parking at the street at Doyle, Parking in residential zones is not intended to be in front of the building, so they're asking for a PD variance of that. That condition has been there for many, many years, likely recognized but not formalized in the PD of past years. There's also a location for a refuse dumpster and containers that's right there at the street, and this PD requests and proposes to build a screening wall around that dumpster will help to screen that utilitarian use of the property. Let's see. So that takes you through most of the higher level items and uses that are occurring on site. One of the things I wanted to mention was over the course of the years, the bed and breakfast host was allowed to live either on site or off site within 300 feet. So that has been allowed and would be continuing. The reason that's important is because if it's a bed and breakfasts are allowed to have 7 guest suites, and it's expected that the host would live on site to provide services for the guests. So within 300 feet was an arrangement made years ago in one of the PD approvals. Let's see. So where the parking lot is on this property, there's a double line, and that's the driveway to the lake house. Okay? There's very minimal space to provide screening for that parking. The headlight screen we always talk about with short-term rentals, and where there is grass, beneath that grass are multitudes of utility lines, and they're it'd be very difficult to establish a row of shrubs. It's been without shrubs or any kind of screening for a very long time. So that's a request of this PD, just to continue that condition. If you follow that double line down, it becomes a single line. So the pool house and the accessory structure and the lake house are set on that's a property line. So there's a setback that's very close. I believe it's a 3.7 for one of the buildings and a 0 for another. And then also related to setbacks, along the street to the right of this site, over by the conference room, dining room, kitchen building, that building is on the property line as well. So there's some setback requests that have been approved previously, not formally recognized, and this is whole cleanup for this project. So let's see what our next slide holds for us. It should just be a purple dot on the map indicating the PD development zoning with a base of R10, which is these standards that I've been talking about that would be incorporated into that PD, and without an SUP requirement. The requirement would be for a term for the PD to come back, because the SUP standards and use are set in the PD, so the PD would come back. It's pretty much the same thing as we have for the short-term rental SUPs. This site is also in the historic preservation overlay zoning, and any improvements that are made do require to go in front of the Historic Preservation Commission for review. As an example, the screening wall will come before Historic Preservation Commission on Thursday. So they'll be considering that. Let's see. Okay. When a zone change occurs, we take a look at the future land use plan map. This is residential for this area. Again, the zoning's been in place. There's no substantial changes being made. It's just cleaning things up. The comprehensive plan narrative supports bed and breakfast uses, short-term rentals in this area. So we're in good standing with the future land use plan. There's no request to change the future land use plan map. This is the buffer map we provide with short-term rentals. It just shows proximity to other short-term rentals in the area. And now this is the site plan. Oh, wow. That's pretty hard to see. But it includes everything I've just went over regarding parking areas and refuse enclosures and the building setbacks and those kinds of requirements. Let's see. So for zoning, there's a different consideration that needs to be made for your decision-making, and this is in zoning ordinance section 2.3D. The PD, it was established in 2008 and then renewed in 2012 and 2019. Are the uses permitted by the proposal appropriate to the immediate area? We've been over that. The short-term rental bed and breakfast is appropriate in this area with good work and diligence. The use can be compatible with the area. This change, is it in accord with the existing proposed plans for schools, infrastructure, and utilities? Well, this site is existing. There's no added impacts on those items. The other findings are also met. The classification of similar development in the vicinity and elsewhere in the city in any special circumstances which make a substantial part of such vacant land available for development. Now, this really isn't impacting the amount of vacant land available for other development. It's been there for a long time. The recent rate at which land is being developed in the same zoning classification as the requested, particularly in the vicinity of the proposed change. Again, this is development. It's not new. How other designated areas will be affected if the amendment and designation of other areas should be modified. There's really no substantial change. They're keeping the same use on the property. Any other factors that would affect the health, safety, morals, or general welfare? None were identified. Okay. And we did mail out 23 notices to property owners as well as published in the newspaper. We have not received any responses. And I prepared these slides just to formally show what the ordinance will look like. And because of the nature of these in your staff report, which I would incorporate to the record, in your staff report, I referenced you over to the ordinance. Our Granicus system, it's very difficult to show something like this in that system. So if that's what you were expecting, it's a different presentation, I apologize. But basically this is a table format that shows the proposed use, the R10 district base allowance, and the R10 variance. So the use is recognized as the ongoing bed and breakfast hosted as well as short-term rental, specifying the number of total bedrooms and how those uses are allowed, and also recognizing the R10 development standards that are varied with this development. And I'm just going to glance through these and see if there were any that I missed speaking to. And there was a side yard. When you have a side yard in the R10, it's allowed to have a 5-foot minimum one side, provided the total two sides are 15 feet. There's a 0 one side and a approximate 45-foot west side, so that's a total of 45 feet, meeting the sum total. However, with the pool house, that's what this one speaks to. There was a 0 foot on one side. That's an existing condition, as a reminder. Parking, there's no enclosed garage space identified and dedicated to what would otherwise be a single-family residential type of use. There is a garage associated with the conference building, the one that has the conference and the restaurant and the kitchen in it. It didn't appear to be used as a dedicated garage, so it makes sense to allow that as a variance. If this property was ever to go back to a house use, a single-family dwelling, it's conceivable that that garage could open up and be for that single-family purpose. But right now, we're talking about bed and breakfast short-term rentals. Let's see. The lake house there on the west property line has decomposed granite for its surface of parking, whereas the ordinance requires hard surface. That condition, I don't know how long it's been that way, but it's not hard surface, so to allow that to continue. We talked about the other setbacks. The accessory building floor area is about 6,990 square feet. That's primarily the pool house and other accessory buildings on the property. And then the maximum height of the structure between the front building and face of the street, that being the fence, maximum is 4 feet. In order to screen the refuse, it needs a 6 to 8 foot high fence. And then the remaining PD allowances and requirements are a repetition of the existing limitations on the site, that being the number of bedrooms and how the host, when it's hosted, would reside, and subject to the Exhibit B and Exhibit C floor plans and site plans. So this pulls forward some of the requirements from past. No live band or audio equipment shall be allowed on the site addressed as 221 West Doyle Street. That's the west property. That's just carrying forward a request that was made in the past and has been complied with. I'm not aware of any enforcement or complaints about this property. And again, talking to how the operations would be based on whether it's short-term rental versus bed and breakfast, number of bedrooms, and where the host would live. Let's see. And the enclosure screening. I think my battery's going on my clicker here. Okay, and there's just a few more. This is our last slide on these conditions, and these have to do with the city code compliance and enforcement requirements, fees and permit requirements, those kinds of things. So I'd be certainly happy to answer any of your questions, and this slide shows the voting options. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. I open the public hearing. I see the applicants are here. Do you have anything that you would like to add? Okay. I need you to come, Kathy, if you wouldn't mind, to the microphone by Kira.
Is it on? Okay. Just two things. The parking by the 221, it is asphalt underneath the gravel. Yeah, and we just had it redone recently in the past year. And then there is a 2-car garage on that property as well. But it's currently used for storage. But there is one there. It's under that suite that we call the Lakeview Suite. That's everything. Unless anybody has any questions.
Any questions while the applicant is at the podium? Thank you, Ms. Kathy. Any questions for staff? Okay, if not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the request to amend the existing plan development.
Move to approve as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Hayes to approve as presented by staff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hallman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving on. D6, consider the request of Pias, may butcher this, the Souza to replat Lot 2, Block 1 of Southtown Center Addition as Lots 2R and Lots 2R1, Block 1 of Southtown Center Addition. The property is located south of North Plaza Drive and west of Harbor Lakes Drive. Kira?
Okay. So this site is outlined on teal on this aerial map. The site is currently platted as Lot 1R, Block 1, Newell Addition, and, sorry, let me get that updated. The location is on Highway 377, as stated, and the site is proposed to split into 2 lots. As you can see in the aerial, there are 2 buildings existing. Access is from Highway 377. The parking on the site splits the properties. There's parking for the building on the north side as well as parking for the building on the south side. The way that the buildings and improvements line up, the staff is proposing, and the plat is reflecting access easement to the Aldi's, which is to the east of the site. And that access would be a shared easement to the Aldi's to align with the existing service drive there to the south side of that large building. Yeah, I apologize, we didn't get these slides cleaned up. The zoning on this site is like commercial as indicated. It's not in the HP overlay. And the uses on the site are appropriate for the zoning districts. There are variances requested, not, it's hard to see, just a second here. Okay. Not to dedicate 10 feet of right-of-way, not to improve North Plaza Drive to urban standards. And those are to, supported because the Highway 377 widening would require those areas to be built with the 377 widening project. And the, let's see, not to conform with the lot width per the subdivision ordinance section related to lotting and zoning ordinance. And this slide shows the replat with the shared access drive basically bisecting the street, and then showing access points to the east towards the Aldi's site. And all services are provided. If you're wondering about platting with the current moratorium, they can plat and move forward. Those are existing buildings with existing services. Staff is recommending approval of the variances per the city engineer's memo, and also we recommend approval of the replat if the variances are approved. And these are your voting options. If you have questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here? And if so, would you like to speak? Questions for the applicant, commission members? Questions for Kira? If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the replat request, please.
I make a motion for approval on the variances.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Moore, and was that you, Kevin? Earl, was it Earl? Okay, Mr. Erdman, to approve the variances as requested. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And a motion on the actual replat request. A motion to approve the replat request as presented by Mr. Hallman. And a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Erdman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to D9. Consider the following request of Pilgrim Ventures LLC. Final plat, a 33.56 acre tract of the Robert Alway Survey, abstract number 4, as lots 1 through 9, block 1, lots 1X, 2 through 11, 12X, 13 through 22, 23X, 24 through 48, block 2, and lots 1 through 34, block 3, lots 1 through 34, block 4 of the El Dorado addition. The property is located on Loop 567, west of Summerlin Court and east of Summerlin Drive. Kira?
Thank you. This site is located as shown on the slide in front of you. It's 33 acres in size. The site has not been previously platted, however, a preliminary plat was approved March 1st of 2022. This proposed final plat has 122 lots and about a 1 acre private park proposed. This is a zoning map showing that standard R7 zoning. It's a single-family residential district. The surrounding properties there to the east, north, and west are not in the city, therefore unzoned. To the south is business commercial zoning and not yet platted. This slide shows the overall plat. North is on the right, if you will, on the right of this slide. The DRC comments have been addressed. The lots are those smaller rectangles and squares. Off of the Loop 567, on the upper left of the site is a lift station lot where the city will have a lift station. That lift station will be fenced in with decorative screening fence, board-on-board fence with columns. And along lots that have double frontage at Loop 567, there will be a similar decorative fence with board-on-board and columns spaced throughout. There's a private park proposed with this development, and that is to be located there on the, what would be the west property line, some distance into the site. I think you can see that larger lot. It kind of has a line bisecting it. All of that is proposed for that private park. These next slides show the other final plat pages. This is the portion close to the highway, and then the kind of the center of the project, and the northern reaches of the project. And this sheet shows all the dedication, the property boundary, description, and other required information. Staff's recommendation on this is different from contained in your staff report. We noticed that there's a note referencing some of the park and other items, and we'd like these conditions to clean up those notes. The first condition being the final plat shall include a note referencing Common Area B, private neighborhood park, and HOA maintenance responsibilities. And number 2 condition, walls and fence notes shall be updated to reflect the FIA requirements. And so I've included those proposed conditions on your voting options slide for this final plat. Your options are to approve with the conditions or to deny the final plat. I'd be happy to answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. Mr. Hallman, you have a comment?
I do. Is there some incorrect language in this public hearing? Is this the Granbury Hospital purpose of development?
Sure. So that number 1 section is not considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we will clean that up for City Council. It's City Council only for the FIA.
Okay. Just noticed the dollar amount was the same as the previous public hearing.
Thank you.
But notice requirements are affected.
No.
Okay, we just want to check on that. Okay. All right, so we open the public hearing, and is the applicant here? And if so, would you like to speak?
No.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Any questions for staff? All right, then I'll entertain a motion on the final plat request.
I make a motion to approve the final plat with conditions.
I have a motion by Mr. Overdeer to approve the final plat with conditions. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hayes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is D8. Consider request of Lyndall Smith to replat Lot C-D of the Royal Oaks Edition as Lot C-R of the Royal Oaks Edition. The property's address as 5310 Acton Highway and 2620 Oaks Drive. Kira?
So here's the site location map for this property. The property currently consists of 2 lots that are proposed to be combined. Both of those lots are shown on this aerial, outlined in teal. And the size of the site is about 3 acres, and it has been platted previously as Lots C and D, Royal Oaks Edition. And there's no zoning because the site is located in the city's ETJ. Second here. I go over the variance request for this property. Variance request is to not extend water line across the frontage of the development. And the property is in the Texas Water Utilities, CCN, and the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the City of Granbury. It's currently served by Texas Water Utilities, and extension of lines has not been requested by that provider. The second variance requested is to not extend sanitary sewer line across the frontage. Again, the property is in the Texas Water Utilities and ETJ of the city. Currently, the site has OSSF septic system, and there's no wastewater provider in this area. And the last variance request is to not reconstruct Oaks Drive and Royal Lane to conform with the City of Granbury Master Plan and general design criteria. Both roadways are in the Hood County maintenance jurisdiction. Therefore, the city does not have the authority to change that roadway. And the city engineer supports these variance requests. This is a drawing of the replat with all the information contained in it. I believe that black line through the center represents easements and other infrastructure notes and lines, so you need to imagine that this is one lot rather than two shown on that. That's what it's trying to represent. Staff is recommending approval of the variances, and also is recommending approval of the replat. And these are your voting options. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Kira. Open the public hearing. Is the applicant here? If so, would you like to speak? Any questions for applicant or staff? If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion first on the 3 requested variances, please.
Move to approve the variances as presented.
A motion by Mr. Hayes to approve the 3 variances as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Overdeer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now entertain a motion, please, gentlemen, on the replat request.
Move to approve the replat as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Hayes to approve the replat as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Overdeer, I'm sorry. Was that you? Okay. Second by Mr. Overdeer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on. We're on to D9. Consider request of Mary M. Pike to minor plat a 5.468 acre tract of the Joshua Manette Survey, Abstract 352, as Lot 1 and 2, Block 1 of the Pike Addition. The property is addressed as 5464, 5466, 5468, and 5470 Acton Highway. Kira?
Thank you. This site is represented on this aerial outlined in teal. The site is in the city's ETJ, and the purpose of the plat is to sell a portion of the property. And again, the site is in the city's ETJ, therefore it is not zoned. However, immediately to the east is the city limits, and that property is zoned interim holding. So with the variance request with this plat, the requested variances include to not extend water line across the frontage of the development. This is in the Acton Mud CCN and the ETJ. The Acton Mud has indicated that extending water line is not required, and the property will be and is served by on-site existing water wells. The second variance is to not extend sanitary sewer line across the frontage. Again, this property is located in the Acton Mud and Cities ETJ. The Acton MED has indicated that there's not any wastewater lines available for service to these lots. The property is served by on-site existing septic service, OSSF. The city engineer has supported the variance request as stated in the memo. This is the utility plan. It shows the improvements and easements on the site, as well as the wells and the OSSF improvements. And this is the minor plat that's proposed. That's the drawing with all the required information on that drawing. Staff is recommending approval of the variances requested, and also recommending approval of the replat. I'd be happy to answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing, and the applicant's representative, Mr. Randall, would like to speak. Good. Okay. Any questions, staff and members, for the applicant's representative or for staff? If not, I'll close the public hearing and first entertain a motion on the 2 variants requested, please.
Motion to approve the 2 variances.
A motion by Mr. Overdeer to approve the 2 variances as presented. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Erdman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I'll entertain a motion on the minor plat request, please.
Motion to approve the minor replat.
A motion to approve the minor replat by, or just minor, I guess it is a replat, it just says plat, but By Mr. Overdeer, second by Mr. Erdman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Motion D10. I'm going to refer you to all the lots that are on your screen. Consider a request of Legends Land Development LLC to preliminary plat a 155.098 acre tract of the Joshua Manette Abstract number 351 and the J. Campbell Land Survey Abstract number 123 as the lots shown on their television screen. This is of Legacy Ranch. The property is located at and west of 2200 Fall Creek Highway. Kira?
Okay, so this is a quite large tract, being 155 acres in size. It's shown on your aerial there, outlined in green or teal, and is located along Fall Creek Highway. There is some frontage on Fall Creek Highway, but primarily the bulk of the site does not have frontage there, and is behind some existing properties. And the purpose of this plat, it is in ETJ, as well as a portion of it is within the city limits. And the proposal is for multiple lots consisting of 280 single-family, 7,000 square foot lots, 194 patio home, 5,000 square foot lots, 124 townhome lots, and 2,700, those being 2,700 square feet, and 2 commercial lots. So we've understand the standards of the lots that are not within the city limits do not have zoning, and so the bulk and density requirements aren't applied to the platting in the ETJ. However, within the city limits, the bulk and density requirements of the zoning ordinance are. And with this presentation, I wanted to mention that the recommendations are slightly different than that contained in your staff report. So once we get to the recommendation slide, I'll make sure to go over that very carefully with you. So this slide shows the zoning of the property. You can see the outline on your map, and the green within that outline is interim holding district. The interim holding district has a minimum lot size of 2 acres. The remainder of the site that doesn't have a color applied, and you can just see the aerial, the ground, the grass, the improvements, is in the city's ETJ. There is a development agreement to annex at the final plat, and with that, there may be some other requirements. So, and then on to our variances. It's a little hard for me to see with this setup today, so give me a second here and I'll go over the variances.
Didn't you think it's hard for me to see?
All right?
Try
It's
to
okay.
see.
We'll get through this. It'll be good. So the first variance is to not provide one entrance for every 50 lots. The subdivision is unique that the creek runs through the subdivision, and the 100-year flood inundation lines through the subdivision and along the northern property line limits the locations for roadway extensions. And the developer has worked with the city to come up with the most accessible locations for future extensions based on flood inundation areas and the 500-foot minimum block length requirement under the subdivision ordinance. So specifically, and in summary, that's not to provide one entrance per every 50 lots, and that's points of access. The next variance is to not provide 5-foot utility easement along the side lot lines. The area requested for this variance is specific to the townhome section of the subdivision, where the development calls for multiple townhomes per building. Between the buildings, the developer will provide a 15-foot utility easement on one lot and a 5-foot utility easement on the abutting lot to allow utility access between the buildings. This is sufficient for ensuring proper installation and maintenance of proposed utilities in the area. And so this slide, not to have 5-foot utility easement along townhome side of lot lines. So that's the area where the townhomes would be in that little drawing, and that is how that building would lay across the lots and how the easements would be shown. This is the city engineer's memo expressing support for these proposed variances. And now we'll show the overall preliminary plat. I wanted to show you on this slide is with that dashed line on the right there, that's the city limits line. To the right of that line, the properties are zoned interim holding. Again, the interim holding has a minimum lot size of 2 acres. To the left is unzoned ETJ property, so we don't have zoning in ETJ, and we don't plat to bulk, which is the zoned lot sizes. So this influences our recommendation and our conditions for that recommendation that we'll get to. As a closer look on this slide, you'll see that lots are overlapping that jurisdiction line, and lots can't overlap. They need to have their property lines on the line. Can't be both in and outside of the city limits. That influences things like school districts and assessments.
Police
and
response.
Police response and other things. So that's why it's important to identify this. Now, there is a development agreement. It's a little bit complicated and difficult to read that would require annexation of the ETJ upon final plat. So that kind of also plays into our recommendation. We've been very, very diligent and worked with the applicant to craft something up that would be satisfactory. And this is a little closer up view of that. And then, let me go back. So this is the overall, and what you're going to see a progression of is through the site beginning at the southeast corner of the plat, okay? So this is the southeast corner. Fall Creek is to the right, and then we're going to be going southwest. Okay? So this is the southwest portion where the city engineer was mentioning drainage of the creek coming through the site. Then we're going to go to the northwest corner. You can see more of that drainage progressing through the site. It's quite a bit of drainage area. And then this is the final quadrant of the site proposed for platting. That's the northeast quadrant. And then we have the preliminary plat sheet that shows all the lot sizes and lot numbers and all the pertinent information that's required. So our staff recommendation on the variances are in support of the variance request for the city engineer's memorandum. And we also have recommended conditional approval if the variances are approved of the preliminary plat with these conditions. With the final plat of phase 1 and final plat of phase 3, those are the phases that have both jurisdictions, the ETJ and the city bound corporate limits. That those phases, the lot configuration will need to be updated to follow the city limit ETJ boundary or annexed in the preliminary plat lotting plan. And that's a little, or annexed, and this is as they're shown in the preliminary plat lotting plan. And this remedies the bisected lots. And then with the final plat of phase 1 and final plat of phase 3, lots zoned interim holding will need to be shown with minimum 2-acre lot size or zoned to district permitting the lot size proposed. So this covers, these two conditions cover the bisected lots as well as that interim holding concern with 2-acre lots. We've worked with the applicant as of 4 o'clock today to finalize this language and make sure that it would fit both the city's needs as well as the developer's needs. So I'm confident that we've gotten to that point. We've worked very hard to get there. So these are your voting options. I'm going to go back to that slide so that you can see those conditions.
And can you go back, and would you read one again?
Sure. With the final plat of phase 1 and final plat of phase 3, the lot configuration will need to be updated to follow the city limit ETJ boundary or annexed in the preliminary plat lotting plan.
So they gotta plat those to either be ETJ or city, one of them. They gotta pick, or they will pick? How
They will do that. We have a development agreement that requires final platting and annexation. And it's a little complicated there, but this condition does satisfy that.
Wow, real estate's going interesting. Can figure out what, you gotta have a map with you to figure out if you're in the city or not within the subdivision. That doesn't usually happen. Or usually a subdivision is usually one way or the other. Interesting. Okay.
I had a question.
Okay, all right. Are you done, Kira, or are you still going?
I'm done, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so I'll open the public hearing, and is the applicant here, and if so, would you like to speak? Okay, we have a question, would you come to the podium?
I just have one.
Oh, this is of Kira?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I think you may be off the hook. Any questions of the applicant?
Did I understand you say,
Just Kira. Go
is
ahead.
the city making the decision on these lots, on the city limits or the ETJ, or is that the developers making that decision?
So we've worked together today to come up with these conditions. The development agreement requires annexation at the time of final plat.
Okay.
The subdivision ordinance requires the lots to conform to the zoning ordinance, and that's why we had to really get creative and think through these conditions. And that's why we made those conditions, is because we have no other way to move the preliminary plat forward without these conditions.
Okay. All right. So I guess,
So it will be withdrawn. It will be redrawn, because it's gotta be one way or the other.
okay, because I mean, if they are in the ETJ, they're still going to be on the city services, correct? They'll be in the city sewer, city water.
So this would be in the streets
Oh,
will be
that's
the
AMUD?
cities, and this is
AMUD.
Oh,
AMUD
it's AMUD.
otherwise.
Okay. I was thinking that was city's services out there. Okay.
So that's right, what you're saying. They will redraw it at final plat to be those bisected lots, one way or the other.
One way or the other,
And
correct.
they'll choose which one.
Mhm.
Okay.
What is the total number of lots? This is for my personal. I think you stated it earlier. I just didn't want to have to go through and count them.
599, 600? 599.
And my understanding is one way in and one way out.
Let's go back to the drawing. There's access, 2 access points to Fall Creek Highway. And then the connections will be provided to the west, as well as, there should be a north connection. Is there more than one to the north?
If I may.
Yeah.
Good evening, Joe LaCroix with Barrett Hampton Brown Engineers. We're the civil engineers engaged on the project. We currently have 2 connection points to Fall Creek Highway. There'll be connection points going to the west as well as to the north and to the south. So the variance that we worked with the city engineer on for this is we had originally introduced 12 connection points. It got a little busy on the south side, so she'd asked us to actually remove one of those connection points. We reviewed that with the fire marshal and the fire department. I think they're satisfied with that as well.
Kira, there's no way to just have all of these lots in the city limits? I mean, the one person owns them all. I mean, they can, I guess part of the agreement would be that they could just, because I know you can't involuntarily annex them anymore, but if they agree to be annexed, they can't just put them all in. I'm just looking at it from a public safety response, you know,
So-
in a dispatch response. I
right,
look
so-
at it from that way, and
Yeah, I understand. So let's keep in mind that what we're considering is a preliminary plat.
yeah.
And so once we get to final plat and actual development, they are required to annex with the final plat, so that'll be in the city. And then resolving the existing interim holding 2 acres lot size as well as the cross-jurisdictional, that will be taken care of by the time they're built.
I understand it's the preliminary, it's just,
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out for future reference, because man, what a,
Do you mind if
What a
I
nightmare
take a
trying
minute
to-
to address that?
No, go
Yeah,
ahead,
go
sir.
ahead.
Yeah, so this one is a little bit unique in that there's a 380 development agreement. The intent is upon final plat, we'll be annexing that in phase by phase. So you're not going to have a scenario where the lot is half in the city, half out of the city. It will be annexed prior to final plat. The language in that the 380 agreement, you know, written and agreed upon by the city council and city staff and the developer, is that the annexation wouldn't occur until the final plating happened. And so once that final plat does happen, it'll automatically be annexed. And we'll be requesting voluntary annexation.
For the entire
Phase by phase.
155 acres?
So it'll be 3 phases. They'll be annexed in phase by phase.
Okay. but the intent in the long run is all 155 acres will
That's
be-
correct, yes, ma'am.
will be
Okay.
asked to be voluntarily annexed.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's written in the 380 agreement as well, so that's already signed, that's the intent, and that's the way we'll request it.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Any other questions for Kira? Okay, thank you, sir. Right, so would you put the voting options back up, Kira, would you
Sure.
mind? Okay, so first we have a action to vote on the two, I believe there were two requested variances on the, associated with the preliminary plat. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Have a motion to approve the two, I assume your motion is to approve the two variances. Mr. Erdman, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hayes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And then a motion, please, on the request for the preliminary plat.
I'll make
Yeah.
a motion to approve the preliminary plat as
With the
Presented.
conditional approval, Mr. Moore?
yes, with
All right,
conditions.
so we have a motion by Mr. Moore to approve the preliminary plat with conditional approval as listed by staff. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hallman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us to D11. Public hearing, consider request of the City of Granbury to amend certain select sections of the City of Granbury zoning ordinance. Amendments proposed are to Article 1, Section 1.8, classification of new and unlisted uses, and Section 1.0, certificates of occupancy and compliance, Article 2, Section 2.1, Board of Adjustment, Section 2.3.b, public hearing and notice, and Article 3, nonconformities, Section 3.1, nonconforming uses and structures. The general purpose of this amendment is to clean up confusing language, offer administrative actions, and ease the usability of the zoning ordinance administration. Mr. Farmer?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. My name is Craig Farmer. I'm with the firm of Municipal Planning Services, LLC, and I've been engaged by the city of Granbury to go through your zoning ordinance and make some amendments to try to streamline it and help it facilitate development. And coincidentally, I was involved when I was the director of planning in Carrollton with a lawsuit involving existing houses that straddled the Collin County, Dallas County line. And the question was, where were the voting rights? And, and what it turned out was, surprisingly to me, the voting rights by the courts were determined to be the master bedroom. And then I thought that was kind of humorous because I said, well, that's probably right. That's where the decisions really are made. But they had to decide which part of the house actually set up the voting rights, where you voted. I have gone through at a previous briefing in great detail. Oh, it works this time. So good. We are looking at Article 1, 2, and 3. 1's general provisions of the zoning ordinance, 2's administration, 3's nonconformities. Moving along fairly quickly, and stop me at any point. I can address these in great detail if you would like. In the new unlisted uses section, the classification of new and unlisted uses, we added to that a process where the director can find the closest applicable zoning district and classification on the use chart for a use that hasn't been seen before, but if it's similar to existing uses, then they can take a look at it. The director can look at it and make a determination. Appeal of that decision by the director goes to the city manager's office, and then it would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, not the Board of Adjustments on this particular one, because the existing ordinance has you all looking at classification of uses in the use charts. The next one is interpretation of text requirements, and again, we've set up a process where the Community Development Director makes an interpretation of that requirement. And their interpretation, if the applicant or whoever's making the request doesn't agree with it, they appeal to the City Manager's Office. And there's an appeal of the City Manager's Office. That would also go to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council on the interpretation of a text requirement. Next item, new and unlisted uses. we came up with a process called Regulation, Interpretation, and Modification. 1.8.c is a new section, Administrative Modification of Regulations. This is a process where the director can grant a modification. We're calling it a modification, so it's not a variance, it's not a waiver. We're saying it's a modification of a requirement by up to 10%. So, for example, if there's a side yard setback of 6 feet and someone accidentally pours the slab in the wrong place, it would allow, I guess, almost about 8 inches, I think, would be about 10% of that distance. Same thing with front setbacks and other height limits and all those sorts of things. So it's not just maximums or minimums. It can be percentages of the yard or something like that. Number of parking spaces, 10% modification of that. There's criteria in the ordinance, and you have it in front of you as to under what situation they can do that. Again, the appeal is to the city manager's office, and then that will come to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. Certificates of occupancy and compliance, we had to expand what certificates of non-conforming were because of the new state statute. Basically, if a zoning amendment makes a use non-conforming, the notice not only has to go to the property owner as per the tax roll, but it also has to go to any occupants or even tenants or renters on the property. That's the new state statute. It was effective June 1st. We have come up with a process, I'll talk about it in a minute, where we figured out how to do that. But this certificate of occupancy expands the certificate of nonconforming, where somebody would come in and register their nonconformity and say, you've made me nonconforming. I want to register that so I can have the protections in your ordinance. And 10H clarified that those new procedures can't reduce or supersede an existing requirement in the ordinance. So zoning amendments, part of our phase 1 changes was the administration side. The Board of Adjustments is in this section. They have a lot of duties. They're basically the relief valve for a city, the quasi-judicial board. We have cleaned up under variances a couple things. There's been some issues in the past where variances would become invalid after 90 days if they hadn't applied for their permit. Quite often, if a person is having to get a variance, they're not going to spend a lot of money on their plans or arranging financing and everything else until they've gotten the variance, and that can quite often take more than 3 months. So there's been quite a few times when they've had to go back and ask for an extension. So we're clearing that up to 1 year, and then we're also allowing the Director of Community Development to give an additional 6 months if they've made substantial progress on that, on taking out the permit for that variance. Some cities it runs with the land and is permanent. Some cities, as I discovered, have even less time than this. So I think this is a good in-between that would accommodate most development requests. Section 2.1.f is special exceptions. We basically did the same changes there. And the 1 year and the additional 180 days by the director if there's substantial progress. Again, that 1 year, if someone is going to take 2 or 3 years to actually take out a permit, they can ask the Board of Adjustments for that time frame. It's just that the 1 year would be the standard minimum. We also added to the table of special exceptions that an applicant could ask for a special exception to reduce the number of parking spaces or look at shared parking with the adjacent property owner, and also reductions in the square footage of landscaping of trees and alternative landscaping water conserving methods. So all 3 of these special exceptions would go to the Board of Adjustments. This is going to be temporary on the landscaping and trees. We'll be coming back with further amendments to those ordinances. We'll probably develop a different process, but right now this is the relief valve for hardship cases for landscaping and non-conforming landscaping and those sorts of things. Amendments to the zoning ordinance. This is where an amendment is what you've been going through, where you rezone property. That's an amendment to the zoning ordinance. Your standard notice is to everybody within 200 feet, plus notice in the newspaper. We've added this item 3 there, notice of hearing of new nonconforming use. This is a use change, but it can be a text use change, or it can be an actual map amendment that creates nonconforming uses. But we're tracking the state law that says you've got to send notice if it's a text or a map amendment. So for example, if you make a change to the use charts in the text, in the past you didn't have to send notice to anybody for making a text change. Now you will have to make those notices if it makes a use nonconforming. So nonconforming structures, nonconforming lots, those sorts of things would not be affected. It's a use where you make it nonconforming. I think the notice of the nonconforming use at the bottom of it has to have this paragraph in 14-point font. It says that in the statute that the city of Granbury is holding a hearing that's going to determine whether you lose the right. And please read this notice carefully. We are recommending that any notice that goes out from the city to adjacent property owners or on text amendments have this same paragraph in it if it's a use amendment. There's also I ran into this in a different city, and waiver of notice, because we have to send notice to so many different people, and we have to try to use the tax roll plus any other method we can to find who tenants are. The legislators assume that cities know absolutely who rents property, and that's not necessarily true, especially if the owner's paying the utilities and those sorts of things, and the tenant, the city may not have any idea who's there. So there's a waiver of notice if we happen to miss a notice on the tax roll, a name is missed, then the applicant could go get with that person and ask them to get a waiver of notice. And if they agree to it, then and sign the notice or the waiver of notice, then you could stay on track with your public hearing. The intent there is people come in and say, I didn't get a letter. You can check the tax roll, and if they are in fact an owner or tenant now that should have gotten notice, then you can say either, will you waive the right to notice, or if you refuse to waive it, then we'll have to re-advertise and re-notify and go through that process. The city attorney will take a look anytime there's a real question about whether notice was proper. And we're making sure that if notice is posted in the U.S. mail, that is not a missing notice. If the post office delays the mail too late, or if the tax office information is incorrect, we're saying in your ordinance that's not inadequate notice. Okay. In other words, the city did what it was supposed to do. Nonconformities, this is the part where it gets complicated. There's nonconforming uses of land, and we've made some modifications because it was very confusing. It sounded like if you just added some merchandise, you could violate nonconforming. Remember, nonconforming, theoretically, you don't want to expand nonconforming. You want to have what you had when you became nonconforming. In other words, you were legal at one point to have this much area for merchandise. And so when the ordinance changes to where your use is no longer allowed, you could still have that much merchandise as a nonconforming use. You just can't expand the area, so we made sure that was clear. There's been some questions on that. Nonconforming uses of structures is pretty straightforward. It's an existing structure, but you got a nonconforming use inside the structure. We just clarified alteration in size and how that applies. And then finally, there's what's called a nonconforming structure. In other words, the use is a nonconforming. The structure is violating a setback or too close to the road or something like that. And if you want to expand it, then there's some additional parameters. It actually adds some flexibility to the director to allow people to do that. Some of the flexibility in this is the director is now allowed to administratively authorize expansion of a nonconforming use or structure up to 10%. It's a one-time expansion, so you don't come back each year for 10 years and get 100% expansion of nonconforming use. And then allows the Board of Adjustments to authorize a bigger expansion up to 50%. It used to be 25%. Quite often, these uses were annexed and brought into the city, and then once they were zoned, they were non-conforming. So the Board of Adjustments is allowed to hear those and determine if a non-conforming use can be expanded or if it has to be left the same. Does that make sense? Destruction of nonconformity, basically, that's if the use is destroyed. Technically, if the nonconforming use is destroyed, then there's no problem putting back a use that conforms, in other words, a different use. Usually, the Board of Adjustments can authorize someone to reconstruct destroyed nonconforming use, and so this changes that for up to 1 year. If the Board of Adjustments allows it, it's a 1-year extension of that nonconforming use. And the registration of nonconformity, we talked about that. This is tracking the new state law. We said when there's an ordinance amendment or a map boundary adjustment that creates some nonconforming uses, they have 3 months to register that with the city. Your existing ordinance basically said you only had the 3 months. We said you also, if you want to come back in later and just prove you were nonconforming, you were legal at the time of the ordinance amendment or the map amendment, you can register it later. And you get that certificate that says you're legal to operate. So that's it's a little less harsh than the existing ordinance. The requirement to stop or discontinue a nonconforming use, this is where the state law stepped in. You've got to notify property owners, tenants, and everybody else if you are going to issue a nonconforming stoppage. You know, you have to stop being a nonconforming use. And then it steps in to determine a reimbursement method. Most cities, yours included, in the old days, said you have a certain amount of time to amortize the use, and once you've reached that amount of time, and typically it happened with wrecking yards, sexually oriented businesses, and other uses that were pretty undesirable. They said, you know, you've had 7 years to amortize your investment. It's been 7 years, so you have to go out of business. The new statute says that the applicant, or not the applicant, the owner or the tenant gets to choose, no matter what, the city would have to pay relocation expenses. The city would have to pay the difference in market value or allow the person to continue the use until the market value is amortized. So it's more complicated. Believe it or not, this part is actually a little bit friendlier, which is hard to believe, than the old rules, because now let me back up. I just did something.
Okay.
We're done. No. Technically now, if the property's worth more than when the use became non-conforming, you might not owe any money other than relocation, if that makes sense, if the market value is higher. So it's a much better process. This was a whole bunch of technical. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Y'all have gotten a lot of business done in an hour, so I'm impressed.
I think hour and a half. Okay, so, any questions for Mr. Farmer?
Still impressive. Well, I took up 25 minutes.
All right, no questions for Mr. Farmer? All right, then thank you, sir. We'll close the public hearing and consider a motion to approve these amendments of the select sections of the City of Granbury zoning ordinance, please.
Move to approve.
Motion to move to approve by Mr. Hayes, and a second. Second by Mr. Hallman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. And we'll end our meeting tonight, and the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for coming.